probably like 11 p.m. here. I'm in Texas right now visiting family because for the first time since 2019, we get to see my brother-in-law because he's been overseas, and because of the pandemic, he's finally gotten to come back to the US to visit. So that is why I'm in Texas, and today has just been like a really rough day. And honestly, I guess it started yesterday when I was flying here to Texas from my home. I live in Las Vegas, and I was reading a story about this kid who's 15, and he has like this specific type of bone cancer, and he's dying, and he's definitely going to die pretty soon. And I was just reading through the book of Job, and just what Job dealt with and what his friends were saying to him. Hi everybody, for you all that are joining the live stream. Hello. I love it when you guys like type in the live chat. Just please don't fight with each other. That's the only thing I ask. So I know it's late, but like I was saying, so it's been like a rough couple days, and it all started when I read this story about this 15-year-old kid that has this like rare bone cancer, and I'm just like asking God, like, why is it that these kids are dying these horrible deaths? They're suffering, and for all intents and purposes, it's like so many of these kids are good and they're loving and they're kind, and they show like all of the things that are talked about as like the fruits of the spirit, like this loving, gentle kindness. Like, it's just, they seem like all good, and they get dealt this like terrible hand. Meanwhile, they're just these like absolute cretins who live until they're 1 billion years old, and they always have a place in like the government. It's like, how is everybody a crypt keeper and they're just like a billionaire? How is it always like this, God? Like, why is it that these kind children are dying these horrible, painful deaths? Meanwhile, like the biggest swamp monsters are living to be like 102. Why is it that way? And it's frustrating because like you have those questions, God, why does evil allow to like basically go unchecked? Why is it that so many good people die young? Like, it's frustrating. And if you've never been frustrated with God, I seriously question if you even have a relationship with him, because we're supposed to have these conversations with God. Like, God, I don't understand why you do things in this way. I don't understand why you allow these things to happen. And that was yesterday. So I'm on the plane and I'm just thinking about this, and I'm like trying not to cry because I'm on an airplane, but at least it's dark so I can get a little weepy without it being like too noticeable, right? So that's what I'm thinking about. And then today, if you guys have followed me on the Crack Your Bible Facebook channel or the community tab here, you know that there was an incident today when I went to the Texas State Capitol. So I went to the Texas State Capitol, and outside of the Capitol there was a table with like street preachers, and I'm just like, whatever. Because to me, honestly, I don't think that a lot of street preachers are in it for the right motives. I think a lot of it is very self-serving, where it's like, oh, look how religious I am, and here I am telling everybody like what sinners they are. And it's just like, whatever. Like, it's all about ego and everybody looking at them and like, wow, they're so religious. They really irk me. And I see them all the time. It doesn't matter where I am. Hawaii, New York, Texas, Vegas, everywhere. They're everywhere. Usually screaming about stuff that does not matter. Like wearing pants, wearing jewelry, like that kind of stuff. But, you know, today I got into it. I got into a verbal argument with the street preacher because he wouldn't move out of the center of the rotunda where people were trying to take a photo. It's like, You've already had a table outside that people have walked past and they've declined to like listen to you. So now you're going to send in another person to come scream at people right in the center and not allow them to at least like get their photo. Like, I don't care if you're going to yell at people and preach or whatever. Just go like over to the side so at least people can get their photo, right? Because like, you still want to be cognizant of the fact that people are here because they want to see the architecture or whatever, and like, get out of people's way kind of thing. Like, yes, people can still hear you, but like, don't be a nuisance. And he would not leave. Like, this went on for like over half an hour, and it's a rotunda, so it's echoing, and he's just yelling about like wearing jewelry, and then something about how he has rights, and something about speed limits, and how God's going to take a sword to people. And I was literally done at that point. So I went up to him. I don't know, should I post the video? Like, I literally filmed myself because I was afraid that he was going to hit me, but at the same time, he didn't hit me. But I do have that. If you think that I should post that, let me know in the live chat. But anyway, I was saying, like, let people take a photo. Like Matthew 23:5, they do all of their deeds to be seen by other people. And then he had asked me like, oh, what do you do? And I was like, well, I have this channel. Like, that sounds like so gross to me. Like, well, I have this channel. Like, it's really not that special, right? But I was like, yeah, I also preach the gospel. I have subscribers. Like, I'm not an atheist, right? And he's like, oh, well, do you preach, or are you for gay marriage? Are you for abortion? And once I answered those two questions, he's like, oh, so you're a Christian. Since when did the whole gospel have, like, the only two things that make somebody a Christian? Are you against gay marriage and are you against abortion? What? Like, that's not even the gospel, right? But here's my issue. Here's my issue when people have all of these, like, street preachers that are going out and they're condemning people for things that either the Bible talks about or the Bible doesn't talk about, like women wearing shorts. When you start condemning people that you don't even know, you have no clue who they are, you don't even know if the people that you're talking to are atheists to begin with. They could just be a very annoyed Christian like myself in the audience. Like, I know the gospel, I preach the gospel, can you please move so I can take a photo? Like, first of all, you don't even know your audience. But second of all, when you're out there just making these like sweeping generalizations about people, does anybody ever wonder why people are engaging in sexual sin? Does anybody ever stop and wonder why people are doing these things? Why is somebody getting an abortion? Why are they doing these things? Because if you don't care why they're doing these things, then how can you just scream at people to stop? You have no idea what's going on in their life. And that's why it's so important to develop relationships with people when sharing the message of the gospel. When we look at Jesus, he wasn't just screaming at people. He was having dinner with the tax collectors and the prostitutes. Jesus was literally sitting down and having a meal with them and talking about the things that are going on in their life. He was having conversations with people. When the apostles went out, they didn't just start screaming at people. They first went to the synagogues, and they went to places where people who were already familiar with God and the message of a coming Messiah, they were already familiar with that concept. And this is why over and over and over again, the gospel talks about our behavior. This is why we're told to be submissive. Like, if you're a slave, work as if you're working for the Lord, that kind of thing. Because when people see your behavior, they say, I'm interested. Like, compared to everybody else I see, this person's different because of their behavior. This is why James 2 constantly talks about behavior. Faith without works is dead. It's not good enough to just say things to people. You actually have to do things to help them in their situation. So that's why James 2, when it's talking about if you see a brother who's naked and hungry and they're cold and you say, be warm and well fed, but you don't do anything to meet their physical needs, your faith is dead. Likewise, in the same way, just screaming at people, don't be engaged in whatever sexual sin they're involved in, without actually meeting them in their needs, is faith without works. It's dead. It is totally dead. Why is this person engaged in that sexual sin? Are they a survivor of some sort of trauma, and this is the only way that they were taught to show love? Maybe they were abused as children. You don't know if you don't have a conversation with them, if you don't have empathy for people. People have been trafficked. There's so many families that have incest in them. There's sexual abuse in these families where people don't know any better. This is their coping mechanism. Maybe they've had a parent or an uncle or a family friend that sexually abused them. So then to try to get that out of their mind, they're trying to replace that experience with other experiences with people in their peer group. Or maybe, who knows? Who knows? There's so many crazy things that people have gone through that are just horrific, terrible things that people have gone through, where they use unhealthy coping mechanisms to get through just another day. And if you don't talk to people about this, if you don't realize, nobody walking in victory is just deciding, you know what, hey, I'm going to do meth today. It doesn't matter what sin you're telling people, hey, stop doing this. If you don't know why they're doing it, you're just screaming in the wind. You have to actually have conversations. What led you to this decision? What's really going on below the surface? Did you not have a loving family figure, a loving parent, and you're trying to get that love that you didn't have from whether it's a mom or a dad or something, and you're trying to replace it with a sexual relationship because that's what you were always taught, or maybe you were prostituted. These things happen. I hate to break it to you, but we live in a fallen world. There are children that are prostituted. There are people who are abused by family members. There are people who are dealing with all sorts of crazy trauma that they've turned to sex or drugs or the occult or whatever. And we have to be cognizant of that. How many people have grown up in churches where they've been sexually abused by church staff, by pastors? And this is why they want nothing to do with Christianity. So when you just start screaming at them that God's going to bring a sword on them, why would they even want to listen to you? If you start screaming that, oh, all women who have had an abortion are going to hell, and then you don't understand, why are women having abortions? Oh, well, she got a cancer diagnosis and she couldn't start chemo unless they terminated the pregnancy because you can't do chemo while you're pregnant. So it's either she and the baby dies, or they terminate the pregnancy and now she can receive chemo and possibly live to take care of her other children and her spouse. If you don't consider the fact that not everybody is deciding, you know what, I just want to go out and sin today. This is why I'm deciding to make these decisions. People aren't cartoon villains. They're really not. They're real people dealing with real problems. And not everybody has learned healthy coping mechanisms. Not everybody has this perfect life where everything is so wonderful. We live in a fallen world. Disease exists. Abuse exists. Things just don't work out. I just don't understand why people are so quick to point the fingers at everybody. Don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. Instead of saying, hey, I know that you're doing these things, and of course that's not God's highest and best for you, but what's going on in your life? What are the things that you're dealing with? Because God tells us that we're supposed to bear each other's burdens. And how can I do that if I'm just screaming at you to stop engaging in this sexual sin, or having abortions, or doing drugs, or, being an alcoholic? Just screaming at an alcoholic to stop drinking is not going to address the underlying issues. Maybe they've seen some stuff in their life. Not everybody is living in like a upper middle class suburb where everything is just like white picket fences. And even people who are wealthy have seen a lot of stuff as well. So like, can we be more empathetic in our approach to dealing with people struggling with sin? Can we just realize that first we have to address the feelings and the things that led to them choosing to make these decisions that are not the highest and best that God has in store for them, that are behaviors that God doesn't approve of, and we understand that God doesn't approve of them. We're not saying like go out and do these things, like have fun. What I am saying is there is something that led you to this decision. There is something that is causing you to seek out this sort of behavior. What is the underlying root cause? And that's what we need to address. It's kind of like Cain. Remember when he was upset with Abel? This is before he killed Abel, right? So in Genesis, Cain offers his sacrifice to God, the best, or the fruits and vegetables, whereas Abel offers the best part of his flock, the firstborn. And God accepts Abel's sacrifice, but Cain's he doesn't. And God addresses the fact that Cain was angry. I know that you're upset, right? But don't you know that if you offer the right thing, the first, the choice, the best part, your sacrifice will also be accepted. And God told him, sin is knocking at the door. So God doesn't say stop being angry. First he tells him, like, I know that you're upset, right? And then second of it all, he tells him a solution, like, hey, here's how we can remedy this solution. And 3, I recognize, like, you're having this temptation, right, to sin. But of course, not everybody's going to listen to you, just like Cain didn't listen to God. So what did he do? Did he go out and did he produce an acceptable sacrifice to God? No, he went out and killed his brother. So even though not always people will listen to you, even though you're addressing this underlying issue, like, hey, I see that the underlying cause or the underlying issue is jealousy, frustration, anger, whatever else was going on in the family of Adam, Eve, Cain, and Abel, all of their other siblings that they had. Who knows? There's always these underlying factors. Things don't happen in a vacuum, right? So we have to be like God. Although people aren't always going to listen, we still need to address the root cause. What is the root cause that's causing these issues? So it's frustrating because I know it's easy to just yell at people and say, stop doing this, stop doing this, stop doing this, stop doing this. But we want to be effective when we speak to people. We want to preach the truth. We want to preach the whole counsel of God. But we want to make sure that we're planting seeds and also being God's hands and feet. We want to be God's hands and feet. And we can't be God's hands and feet if we're not willing to get down in the trenches with people, if we're not willing to sit down and have dinner with the people who are considered the untouchables, the outcasts, the enemies, the prostitutes, the tax collectors, the Gentiles, the Canaanites, whatever, the Samaritans, like whatever. We have to be willing to talk to these people just one-on-one and not see them as like a notch on a spiritual belt. Yep, I ministered to this person and this person and this person, and then I got 5 people to say the sinner's prayer with me because they wanted me to just leave them alone. Like, we have to realize that these are real people that have real issues and they're dealing with real struggles. And it's messy and it's uncomfortable and we don't always have the right answer. Sometimes we're going to have to say, I don't know, or I don't know right now, or I need to read more about the Bible because on this issue, I'm not really sure. But we have to be able to be vulnerable with people to reach people. It's not good enough to just go tell people stop sinning. We have to be God's hands and feet. We have to be willing to listen to them. We have to be willing to bear each other's burdens and be empathetic towards them and realize like we were also sinners when God called us. We've also dealt with struggles. Therefore, because we've been through those things, we should be more empathetic towards other people who are struggling. We should be compassionate towards these people. It doesn't matter if they're gay. It doesn't matter if they've had 5 abortions. It doesn't matter if they have an addiction issue. It doesn't matter if they have a criminal past. Like, God still wants a relationship with these people. God still sent his son to die for these people. God still loves these people. And, 2 days ago when I did my video, I talked about how we can't just talk about the love of God. You also have to talk about the justice and the mercy, but you also can't just be fire and brimstone and never talk about the good news of the gospel, that we have a God who loves us and cares for us and wants to, oh my gosh, adopt us into his family and make us heirs of his kingdom. Like, when you realize like what you came out of when he called you, how can you not have a heart for these other people? How can you just look at them and instead of like seeing them how God sees them as like, I love these people and I'm sending my son to die for these people. That's how much I want these people. All you can do is say like, all I see is your sin, your sin, your sin, your sin, your sin. While we were still sinners, Christ died for us. Not just me, not just you, but also them. God desires that none should perish. So how can I look at these people and not also preach the love of God to these people? That there's a way out, that there's a better way of doing things. And that even though things in this world are horrible, they are horrific, the things that people have experienced are terrible, there is hope, there is salvation, there is love through Christ Jesus. It doesn't have to continue to be this way, and it's not always going to be this way. We have to be willing to share these truths with people, even though it's not easy, it's not fun, it's uncomfortable. It doesn't make us feel holier than thou and superior when you realize, hey, I used to be just like you. I've also dealt with these struggles. Even after becoming saved, during the sanctification process, I still had these struggles. We crucify our flesh daily. That means every day we're still struggling with something, and our sanctification won't be complete until Jesus returns. Every day we need to be casting our cares on Jesus because he cares for us. We're not perfect just because we've accepted Jesus. Likewise, we of all people should know what garbage God pulled us out of. And he didn't pull us out of that because we are, worthy of being pulled out. He did it out of his great love for us. And there's nothing particularly special about us. It's just we got pulled out first, and now we have the responsibility to help pull others, to snatch others out of the fire. So, Christians, if your whole message is don't be gay, don't have premarital sex, don't have an abortion, don't drink alcohol, and vote Republican, like, I'm sorry to break it to you, but that's not the gospel. That's really not the gospel. Oh, and don't wear shorts, women, and don't wear makeup. Like, that's not the gospel. That's not the gospel. First, we need to realize that we got to get down in the trenches with people. We got to get down and dirty. We got to be willing to be vulnerable with people. We have to be okay with other people being vulnerable with us. We have to be willing to let go of the pride and the ego that says, I know everything. I know it all. I'm perfect. I've never struggled with sin. We have to be willing to let go of that. We have to be willing to let go of that and say, I've also struggled. I've also had issues where, I was unsure about what to do, or there's times where I stumbled and God needed to pull me back up again. There have been times where, I wasn't sure about my faith, or I questioned God, and that's normal. I want you to know that's normal. So when you're struggling too, know that you're not alone. You are not alone. This is one of the big reasons that Jesus came down from heaven, left his heavenly estate to come down and took on a body of flesh so that he could go through all of the same trials and tribulations that we do, so that he knows the same struggles that we've dealt with. Yet he overcame them. He did that for us. He's empathetic. The book of Hebrews tells us that we have a high priest that is empathetic to the things that we've gone through. He's familiar with our struggles because he's also dealt with those same struggles when he took on an earthly body of flesh. So Christians, I am asking you to remember what cesspit Jesus pulled us out of. And remember, I've struggled just like every single one of those unsaved people out there. And I know that people don't just go out and say, you know what, I just want to sin just because I'm a terrible villain. Like, no. People turn to all sorts of vices because there's something lacking in their life. And it's not always, they're just lacking Jesus. There's so many crazy family dynamics and work dynamics and abuse and trauma and PTSD, and especially if they've been in a war zone, people have seen stuff. So can we be empathetic towards these people? Can we stop just yelling at them to stop doing these things and instead change our message to be like, hey, what's up? What's going on? What things are you struggling with? Because I know a couple weeks ago, I asked y'all, are you struggling? And I think everybody except one person that responded said, yes, they are struggling. They are currently struggling with something. Christians, I want us to do a good job. I don't want us to go out there and our work is in vain. Because, what does it matter if we spend 1,000 hours screaming at people if nobody comes to the gospel? What does it matter? Somebody saying depression isn't real, don't even bother talking to this person. They're just a troll. So anyway, again, what was I saying? I don't even know. Again, so a lot of people are struggling, and we need to be empathetic towards people. People are going through all sorts of things. There's a lot of people out there that have been told that they can't use medication to deal with their struggles. They're not allowed to use therapy to deal with their struggles. They're not allowed to talk to anybody about these problems because they're family secrets. That's going to eat up a lot of people. That's going to lead to a lot of people having a breakdown. And this is why we need to make sure that we have a listening ear for these people, that we have a sympathetic ear, and that we are willing to do the work of an evangelist, to do the work that God has set before us, to be God's hands and feet, to be his ambassador, to be his representative here on earth. We have to be okay with telling people things that other Christians don't necessarily promote. We have to say, hey, I know you're struggling with this and this is a little too big for me. I need to refer you on to a counselor. Or the counselor might say, hey, you know what, this isn't just lots of feelings, there's a chemical imbalance in your head, and this is why you need medication. Like, we have to be okay with things that aren't popular in certain circles of the church, because, you know, preaching the full counsel of God's not popular in a lot of churches either. But we want to make sure that we're doing a good job and that it's effective. This is what I was going to say. So it doesn't matter if we spend 1,000 hours preaching if nobody comes to Jesus, right? It doesn't matter if we spend 1,000 hours preaching, but instead it turns people away from the gospel because they're like, I want nothing to do with these psychos. Like, I don't want to emulate their behavior. I don't want to act like these people. I want nothing to do with them. Therefore, when we go out and we share the message of the gospel, we need to make sure that we're doing it effectively. We need to make sure that we're not turning people away by our bad behavior. I've said this a million times. You might be the only Bible people ever read. You might be the only Bible people ever experience. People first see your behavior. They will know you. They will know that you are my disciples by your love. Are we emulating that? Are we being loving towards people? And loving does not just mean, oh, I agree with everything that you're doing, no boundaries, no rules, nothing. But are you empathetic towards people? Do you realize, like, people are doing the best they can with the tools that they have at their disposition? People are struggling, and they need to know that there is a better way to do things. And first, let's address their struggle before we just browbeat them over the head with, like, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner. Because that's not how Gentiles were preached to in the Bible. That's really not. That's just what it is. So, I don't know. People in the live stream, let me know, have you ever dealt with a self-righteous Christian that doesn't care to get to know you? They don't care about getting to know your struggles. All they want to do is tell you, like, hey, you're a sinner, you're a sinner, you're a sinner. Oh, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. Like, have you encountered Christians in your life where they don't care about you? Like, they really don't care about you. All they want to do is tell you, like, what a screw up you are. If so, let me know down below. Did that make you feel closer to God, or did that just make you want to get away from this person? Because if we're just, like, repelling people where people don't want anything to do with you, that's going to hurt our witness. And it doesn't just hurt your witness, it hurts everybody in the body of Christ. Just like I talked about in my video 2 days ago, you can't have one part of the body going in a different direction and then another part of the body with their eyes on Jesus. You can't go in two directions. One body of Christ, everybody is a member individually of it, and they also make up the body as a group, right? So one's a foot, one's a hand, whatever. You can't have one foot going in this direction towards self-righteous behavior and laziness, and I'm looking down on these kind of people, and then the other one's like, hey, their eyes on Jesus. When we have one person who is acting in a way that doesn't have their eye on Jesus, it hurts the entire body of Christ. It hurts all of our witness. So that's why it's important that all of us have empathy. This is why all of us need to be kind. This is why all of us need to realize, like, people are struggling. People are living in a fallen world, and we have to be cognizant of that if we're going to be effective ministers of the gospel. So anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you. Matthew, please just don't feed the troll, you guys. Don't feed the troll. Anyway, that's what I wanted to share with you guys. I hope you guys will like, subscribe, and share. I hope you have a wonderful day. Love you guys lots. Bye.